Chapter 6, Part 2. Charlie had been really happy to be cleverer at something than his parents were, but now, well, it would have been useful if they'd had that particular knack too. Before the afternoon sun grew too low, Charlie set up his solar panel to recharge his phone. He'd recharge Mum's as well if there was time. There might be messages on it. There might be something to give him a clue. Clue! For goodness sake, thought Charlie, I have a clue. His mum had given it to him herself. He reached into his bag and there it was, carefully folded. Charlie had a bit of a feeling in his chest as he took it out. This was her blood. So what had she written? Oh, letters and numbers, some in brackets, some not, mostly normal size, some tiny little ones up at the top of the bigger ones. It looked like very complicated maths, and it made no sense whatsoever to Charlie. He looked at it for a moment or two, wondering if it was a code. He'd played code games with his mum before, and if it were a code, he'd like to think he could work it out. But nothing they'd ever done had had all these brackets and tiny numbers. I know what this is, he said to himself after a while of staring. This is a formula. He knew what formulas were because scientists use them all the time. So it wasn't nonsense, but it was nonsense to him because he hadn't learned nearly enough science yet to work it out. Sometimes it was a drag having very clever parents. He folded it up and put it away again. He'd learn what it was about. He would find someone who would tell him. He'd be careful who he asked, though. It didn't seem like something he could show to just anybody. And in the meantime, it did him no good at all. He still didn't know why his parents had been taken. Apart from him, who would want them? He thought about it for a bit. He ran over in his mind the phrases which had come up: new job, work business. He knew that the most valuable thing about his parents to other people was their intelligence and the work they did. Charlie had read enough stories. Somebody's after their brain power, he said. After something they know or they can find out. And he felt happier then. Just having worked that out made him feel like he had something to go on. Plus, he had that piece of paper. The reasons why Aneba had not answered his phone were, 1, because there was no reception underwater, and 2, because Skinny Snivelly Sid had nicked it off him when he was asleep to play Snake and had run the battery down. Aneba was annoyed about this. Lying back on the lower bunk with Magdalene dozing on his shoulder, he was staring right into the two-way mirror at the spot where he felt Sid and or Winner would be. Burma, mu, Yequasia, Enemu Hamai Dwi, he muttered. He stared from under his hooded eyelids. His mouth was hard. He hadn't moved for an hour and a half, not a twitch, not a blink, only the tiny movements of his lips, and they were scarcely visible. Basically, he was letting himself look frightening, and he knew perfectly well that he could look very frightening indeed. Wo-ho-ye ahipa, he muttered. On the other side of the mirror, Sid and Winner didn't look like it. What's he saying? Said Winner. What is that? Wo-ho-ye ahipa. What language is that? Demanded Winner. What's he saying that for? Aneba carried on muttering and staring like a block of obsidian possessed by an evil voice. He's meant to be some kind of wise man, some kind of, like one of their wizards, isn't he? Said Winner, who really couldn't tell the difference between a wizard and a university professor. Yeah, said Sid. They didn't like it at all. He's putting a curse on us, said Winner. He's putting a hex on us. Slowly, weirdly, the block of obsidian cracked. Aneba smiled, a long, scary smile. He was pretty sure it was working. All he was saying was, you stupid little irritating men, you're beginning to annoy me. But he bet they thought they were being cursed, and if they did, that was fine with him. Fat and Skinny, as he called them, were already scared of how huge he was. Skinny said he didn't want to go in the cabin anymore. Suddenly, a voice burst over the intercom from the other cabin. Stop cursing us, it cried. Stop it. Aneba lifted his head, flashed his eyes and gave them a huge grin. The effect, after hours of motionlessness, was electrifying. Sid and Winner jumped. Certainly, said Aneba politely. When you give me back my telephone, recharged, and tell me where you are taking us, and why, and on whose instructions." Magdalene rolled her head in her sleep and tried to shift, but there was no room. The ship's cat, a lazy-looking marmalade, fell with a yowl from her lap where he had been lying, and gave her an irritated look. She half woke up. "Charlie?" she murmured. Aneba touched her head. He very much wanted to leap up and break the glass and throw those two guys overboard. He probably could have too. He was, after all, extremely big and strong. But there was something else that he wanted more. He wanted to know why they had been kidnapped, and who by, and what for. More important than escaping was learning what was going on. He stroked Magdalene's head and then turned his gaze to the two-way mirror and started muttering again. "Wo hairdresser nai papa, wo ma me ye kwadu, wo gi me ye sononko, wo hoene ka kraka." Loosely it meant, "You have a very bad hairdresser, your clothes look as if they've been dancing on their own all night, your mother is a banana, your nose is too big, your stupidity is so famous they have statues of it in the city squares." "Your nose is too big" sounded good, so he said it a few more times rhythmically, getting louder and louder. "Wo hueni ka kraka, wo hueni kra kraka, wo hueni ka kraka." "Stop it!" shouted a big fat voice over the intercom. "I'd be glad to," said Aneba. "You know what you have to do." And he lowered his lids again and stared and muttered and stared and muttered and stared. Good old Aneba, using some psychological warfare on Winner and Sid. See you next time.